Welcome to the Pipeline Podcast. Today we're going to talk about the Supreme Court ruling that ICE can be racist. Hell yeah, let's look into it. So if you don't know what we're doing here, this is the Pipeline Podcast. We mostly cover current events and conspiracy theories. We also follow ICE updates a little bit, and that's what we got tonight. Obviously, if you're media literate, you can kind of read past the title and tell that it's a little bit clickbaity. It's a little bit similar to what you're seeing the mainstream media report on about this Supreme Court ruling. So basically, some California court said, hey, ICE is detaining people based on race because people are like speaking Spanish and they're looking for like illegal immigrants, and a lot of them speak Spanish. And so some California court said like, hey, you can't do that because it's racist. And the Supreme Court kind of shut that down today and said, oh, actually you can, and we're gonna talk about it. So we have an article on it here. Supreme Court rules ICE can arrest people for speaking Spanish or looking Latino. I do believe, we're gonna look into it, I do believe this title is wrong, just like our title here. I believe they can only detain people for speaking Spanish or looking Latino or hanging out in areas where they know that there's a lot of illegals hanging out normally. It's stuff like that. Let's look into it. So we have kind of the ruling here. This ruling went through kind of like a streamlined Supreme Court pipeline. The ruling is a little bit different than most Supreme Court rulings. So what we're going to be covering is Kavanaugh, his opinion on the case, and kind of like his argument for why ICE should be able to detain people that they think are illegal, based off of things like what job are they working, what language they're speaking, where they're just like loitering or standing around. And we're going to talk about why it's actually not racist. If you have seen any of the videos on the channel before, you'll kind of know what we're doing here. But basically, we're doing the only thing that any media source should be doing is we're going straight to the source. This is the most direct source on the ruling that we have, and we're going to read it to you and show you. So if you see a news article on this Supreme Court ruling that does not quote like the actual Supreme Court ruling, you just really can't trust it. It's going to be editorialized. It's going to be biased. It's going to have its own perspective that it's trying to push on you, just like any other media outlet. The difference here is we go straight to the source and read it to you. You're welcome for that. So Kavanaugh quotes, he talks about this Immigration and Nationality Act, which authorizes ICE agents to interrogate any alien or person believed to be an alien as to his right to be or to remain in the United States. So it's basically, there's this act that says, hey, if ICE thinks someone is here illegally, they can detain them. Not arrest them. They may briefly detain an individual for questioning. And to do that, to briefly detain an individual, there must be reasonable suspicion that the person being questioned is an illegal alien. So all the headlines that you're reading that are like ICE can arrest people really come back to this right here, which says ICE can briefly detain people if they have a suspicion that they're here illegally. And it goes into it a little bit more. Talks about how there's about 10% of Los Angeles population are illegals. And that does matter, and we'll get into that later. It's down here a little bit. He says the government sometimes makes brief investigative stops to check immigration status of those who gather in locations where people are hired for day jobs, who work or appear to work in such jobs as construction, landscaping, agriculture, or car washes, that often do not require paperwork and are therefore attractive to illegal immigrants. So this is what ICE does. There was some California ruling that said, oh, that's racist, you can't do it. And that got shut down today by the Supreme Court. That's what we're going over. And people who do not speak much, if any, English. And it says here, if the officers detain someone, question them, and they find out they are a U.S. citizen, they just get let go. And that is true. And then if they're illegal, they may be arrested and may be processed for removal. And then it says here, immigration stops based on reasonable suspicion of illegal presence have been an important component of U.S. immigration enforcement for decades. Totally true. This isn't even an opinion thing that you can agree or disagree with. It's just a fact. This has been going on for a long time, since before Trump became president. Again, this has been going on. And then it says district court. It was like a Los Angeles district court said it was racist based on the factors of presence at particular locations such as bus stops, car washes, day labor pickup sites, farms, and the like, or speaking Spanish or speaking English with an accent, or have an apparent race or ethnicity. So the Los Angeles District Court said you can't pick up people based on the language they're speaking, based on their apparent ethnicity, and then based on where they're like gathering. If they're gathering at like day labor pickups or like bus stops or farms and stuff, which is like where a lot of illegals work and gather. So it really was this appeals court, as Pam Bondi calls it. She calls them rogue judges. They're like not federal judges that kind of try to strike down like presidential action. So like Trump's like trying to deport a lot of people, and there's random court that said like, hey, you can't do that in LA. And the Supreme Court said, yeah, actually, that's totally fine. It's been going on for decades. And people get mad at that. But the thing is like the precedent has been set. It goes into it a little bit more, and we're going to go into it. It's not actually racist to do. So that injunction to stop ICE from picking up people based on like where they work, in the languages they speak, it really hampers the efforts to enforce immigration laws in the Los Angeles area, which is true. Here they just quote some previous precedent that's been established in the courts that kind of says like, yeah, ICE has been doing this and can continue to do it. It does say here that even if the ruling held, immigration officers still might not rely on only those factors to detain people. So like say they got a tip that, hey, this is where illegals hang out. They could still show up there. So the ruling is kind of like political anyway, to like ban ICE agents from discriminating or just making assumptions on who might be here illegally and briefly questioning them. It's not an arrest. They can't actually arrest you based on those reasons, but they can question you, they can detain you, and find out your immigration status. Then here it talks about to question someone about their immigration status. The agents only need reasonable suspicion. And then it goes into like, what is reasonable suspicion? And it says it's a lesser requirement than probable cause. For them to detain you and question you, they don't need to exactly know that you committed a crime. They could just say, oh, this guy might be here illegally. Let's find out. And then it talks again about how there's such a high percentage of illegals in the Los Angeles area. All of them, for the most part, most of them speak Spanish. Just the fact that they have reasonable suspicion on people that are speaking Spanish, like, isn't racist. That's just pretty much the norm for that area. And that's kind of why the Supreme Court said that, yeah, ICE can go ahead and keep detaining people. They can't arrest people based off these things. They can only detain them and find out their immigration status. And you're going to see a lot of misinformation, a lot of clickbaity news articles that are going to be saying that. And they're not going to source this ruling to you. It does say here, ethnicity alone does not furnish reasonable suspicion, but it's like ethnicity along with the language they're speaking or the place that they're hanging out or even the job that they're doing or like where they're living. Those things combined would be reasonable suspicion. And that's really all the Supreme Court said. They didn't actually say ICE could go ahead and be racist. That's just what you're hearing in the news. The Supreme Court says it's like a common sense precedent. And when you take in all the factors that LA has a very high amount of illegals and that these illegals mostly do speak Spanish and do have a certain ethnicity, that again, yeah, it's just common sense. You could have reasonable suspicion to check their immigration status. And all that means, again, it restates it, is that they can briefly stop the individual and inquire about immigration status. They can be like, hey, are you here lawfully? And if they're not, they'll arrest them. If they are, then they'll be free to go. And that's what we've seen happen. So tell me what you think. If you have any crazy news headlines about this, because like this was a really good one. Supreme Court rules ICE can arrest people for speaking Spanish or looking Latino. Like that's not, you go and you read the ruling and it very much says they can't arrest people for speaking Spanish or looking Latino. It very, very, very clearly says that they could detain people on reasonable suspicion that they're here illegally. And it kind of goes over how they might have that reasonable suspicion. There's just a lot of illegals in the area. So if they see someone with a certain ethnicity speaking Spanish in that area, It's very reasonable to think that they are here illegally. I think it said, what was it, 10 or 20% of all the people living in Los Angeles are there illegally. I mean, that's just a crazy number. And so that California court that tried to say like ICE couldn't arrest people, like, really was out of line, especially like, we're not going to go into it today, but there was so much precedent set that like these federal agents can double check your immigration status. That's been a thing since before Trump was president, before Trump was even president the first time. Comment the craziest headline you've seen about it. I mean, this one was pretty good. And then just another small ICE update since we're on the topic. It's Operation Midway Blitz. It's like an immigration crackdown in Chicago. So basically, ICE is kind of going through Chicago right now. And I do believe after this ruling, we'll see ICE kind of ramp up in LA for a little bit as well. And then Chicago has been playing the same kind of game as LA, where they're like, we want ICE out. And as we've seen time and time again, it's like the more you try to deny ICE, like the worse it is for you. Like if you don't share information about illegals, especially illegal criminals, with ICE, if you don't tell them like where those kind of people are, ICE is going to have to just roll into the cities, and they might end up deporting other people that they weren't necessarily looking for, but they found that just were here illegally, and they'll deport them. So I don't know if everyone knows, but there are like a lot of illegals that, you know, you like commit a crime and you get out on like cashless bail. So there are just like illegals walking around that have like criminal charges, criminal investigations going on for them. And the states aren't sharing that info with ICE. It's not even about race or anything. It's just about, oh, there's a bunch of criminals on the street. How about we just deport them real quick, make the neighborhood safer for everybody? And we're seeing certain cities like LA and Chicago say, no way, we're not going to do that. But in reality, it probably is for the better. It will probably make a lot of people feel safer, and it will definitely make the community a better place. And so that's why it's really important to cover all these ICE updates. And again, if you saw our title, if you're familiar with the channel, I hope you realized it was satire. The Supreme Court did not say ICE can be racist. That's just the kind of the clickbaity headlines that everyone's going with. The Supreme Court said, yes, you can continue to question people about their immigration status if you think they're here illegally. And it describes ways that you might think that. You might think that if you're conducting ICE operations in Los Angeles, where it's just very close to like Mexico and Latin America, and they have a much, much higher percentage of illegals in Los Angeles. Also, most of them are going to be speaking Spanish. If you're familiar with where those kind of people work and hang out, and you show up there and you see someone that fits that description, you do have the right as a federal agent to ask them about their immigration status. That's all that the ruling really says. And if you disagree with that, leave a comment and let me know why. If you want more of this kind of stuff, check out our channel, and we'll see you in the next video.